Back in action with the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast with you as always, Jeffri Chadiha from the NFL Network and NFL.com, Sam McDowell from the Kansas City Star. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB, and much to cover in this edition of the Red, Gold, and Bold, with a suspension still hanging over the head of Rashee Rice and Hollywood Brown now out for some time. How concerned should the Chiefs be at the wide receiver position? Can the Chiefs get Xavier Worthy ready quicker? Should the Chiefs expect Hollywood Brown to be battling injuries all year? Is CeeDee Lamb an option for the Kansas City Chiefs? I'm sure everybody would like to see that, right? It's totally feasible. Do the Chiefs backups get worked over sufficiently, or should we expect another beating in this next preseason game? How big of a problem are the special teams? Should someone else be handling kickoffs? We're talking about that right now here on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast.
You are listening to the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Chiefs on planet Earth, breaking down the Chiefs like no one else can. Red, Gold, and Bold is hosted by Jeffri Chadiha, Sam McDowell, and Soren Petro. Jeffri Chadiha is a senior columnist and on-air personality for the NFL Network and NFL.com. Sam McDowell is the sports columnist for the Kansas City Star. Soren Petro is the afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. The Red, Gold, and Bold podcast is proudly brought to you by David Starnes Allstate Insurance, covering all the important things in your world: home, business, life, and even the fun stuff as well. Motorcycle, boat, ATV, you name it. Get with Dave and he'll have you covered. You can give Dave and his crew a call, visit them online, or stop into any of their locations, including North Kansas City, Liberty, and Branson, Missouri. Elevate your coverage, elevate your confidence, and drive worry-free. Don't put those insurance needs off any longer. Get with Dave. He'll give you peace of mind today for the things in your life most important to you. Now, here are the hosts of the Best Chiefs podcast, Jeffri Chadiha, Sam McDowell, and Soren Petro.
Thank you very much, Curtis. Off and running here on a Tuesday. If you catch us via the podcast, remember you can be a part of the conversation. Got a lot of folks ready to chat here in the chat room. We stream live 8:30 on Tuesdays is generally where you can find us. And gentlemen, let's get right to it. A wide receiver position, that's been one of the biggest questions for this team to answer, Jeff. Takes a hit. Hollywood Brown goes down in the preseason opener. Rashee Rice has a suspension looming over him. I think we've got obviously some question marks here. How concerned should the Chiefs be with their wide receiver position?
You know what? Look, I don't want to wish ill will on anybody, but the thing that worried me about Marquise Brown and Xavier Worthy was just the size. And just when you're that small, you tend to be fragile. And there's a reason why he probably hasn't had the kind of production that people expect from a guy that fast, because he's not running a lot of routes where, in the past at least, where he's going to get hit. And so to see him go down on the first catch is deflating. I hope he comes back quickly. I hope it's not that serious, but it had to be a huge, huge blow to whatever this team was thinking about. Okay, we're going to get out here and just explode right off the bat. I think Rashee Rice's suspension, the possibility of this guy missing the first couple games or whatever, but also being somebody who could be hurt as the season goes on, it's a little bit scary. I'll tell you what, it's not something I would be excited about. As far as you guys think he's going to have a big year, I've been a little bit less likely to jump on that train for this very reason.
Yeah, and we see it. The injury comes up early. It's been something that's happened often in his career. I don't know. I guess maybe you can say something like they're getting it out of the way early. That's certainly the hope. if you're okay, this is it. This is the one injury. We'll get it all figured out from here, right? That's what you got to hope. If you're if you're the Kansas City Chiefs, where's your concern level, Sam? If you're the Chiefs,
yeah, I mean, I think they should be concerned because of the history. I mean, first and foremost, I feel for the player because of this history. I mean, so I talked to Hollywood Brown just one-on-one earlier this training camp, and he specifically mentioned about how he didn't think he had reached his ceiling, and it was specifically because of the injuries. You know, his first 3 years in the league, he told me he was still dealing with this Liz Frank injury that hurt his draft stock. when he was coming out of Oklahoma. Even though he gets the screw out of his foot after his first year, the next 2 years, he's still dealing with swelling to the point where he's really not practicing during the week. We know his last 2 years in Arizona were cut short on IR. They're all lower half injuries. Like, they're all foot and ankle injuries that he's dealt with over his career. So I think that was the bigger concern for the Chiefs. But Hollywood Brown was so excited because he had gone down to this Camp Mahomes of sorts to learn the playbook, and realized what he actually learned instead was, wow, Mahomes does a lot a month after winning the Super Bowl to keep himself healthy. So he had dedicated himself with nutrition, diet, that sort of thing. But this is a bone injury. This isn't a muscle injury where I think he maybe could have had, some prevention stuff help him out with that. But from the Chiefs and football perspective of this, like, let's not pretend they can be stunned here. This is why he was cheap.
Yep.
Because of this injury history. And this is also the world in which the Chiefs are going to have to operate when they pay their quarterback 25% of their salary cap. Is either you're overpaying for players who are mediocre talents or one-dimensional talents like MVS, or you're taking the risk of injuries. And I still think this bucket with Hollywood Brown, because of the ceiling he provides you, is still the better bucket than, the MVS bucket that they got themselves into in the past.
I think the difference is this guy can actually play receiver when he plays. MVS would play all the time. He just wasn't a very good receiver, right? That's, there is a reason why both of them this go round were available. The Chiefs probably, I really do wonder, who were they bidding against when they went out and gave 3 for $30 to MVS, right? Was there actually another, team? And I can buy it, but I think what we found out quickly was if you can't play with Aaron Rodgers, why would we think you're going to be, if you can't be super productive with Aaron Rodgers, why are you going to be super productive with Patrick Mahomes? That's the difference. We've talked about it many times with Hollywood Brown, is he hasn't had his Hall of Fame caliber quarterback that he's played with. That's why you hope that there's some upside. But Jeff, you're right. Like, the size, little guys get hurt, right? I mean, Bill Belichick said it for a long time. Big guys beat little guys. And, that's what we're seeing here. How much does this set back, the growth of the chemistry, let's say, of Patrick Mahomes and Hollywood Brown? Sam just said it, like, they were working pretty hard to get it going. How much now being out 4 to 6 weeks, or some of the reports, how much does this set him back?
Well, I think it definitely is a hit because, remember, this is his first year in this offense, and they're asking him to do, I think, more things than he's been asked to do in the past when you're running these kind of routes. I mean, I'm sure he ran these kind of routes with other teams, but the frequency of which he'll be asked to do it for this team is going to be higher. And so, yeah, that kind of timing, Pat's an improvisational type player, so being able to work with him and understand the rhythm of it, I don't think it's as simple as people think. I think it's different if you're Tyreek Hill, you've been around the guy for a couple of years, you've been able to practice with him and do all this stuff for a few years, but it's different when you're just stepping into a new offense and you're not going to be out there all the time. We know there's going to be different position groups and different ideas and concepts that Andy wants to run that will take him off the field at times, take Brown off the field at times. So, yeah, I think it's a big hit. And I also wonder, to be honest with you, from a play calling standpoint, after he went down with, I'm guessing, was about 185-pound defensive back taking him down, imagine what's going to happen if he's running over the middle and there's 250-pound linebackers sitting around waiting for him. I mean, I think they may change what they do with him.
Talking about experience with Patrick Mahomes, so I guess, Jeff, you're calling for more Mecole Hardman. Is that what I'm hearing there?
I'm calling for 7 receivers, which I thought was going to be the case last week when we did the whole roster battle. Sam better get on board with that now because it's definitely going to be 7.
Yeah, especially if Hollywood's out 4 to 6, and that's that weird time where, like, okay, are we going to try to get by, with him on the active roster? You don't want to IR him. I mean, it feels like he'll be on the active roster. Sam, you would agree it does make 7 more likely now, doesn't it?
Well, I had him at 7. I just didn't have him should be at 7. And my point was they hardly even use number 5. So yeah. I still, yes, I think it makes it more likely they keep 7 wide receivers. Having said that, like, I've talked to enough people in that building who agree that 7 was a mistake last year. And part of it is because of now what we're discussing with Hollywood Brown is rhythm. When you have 7, it's hard for your top 2 and 3 to have rhythm. This year, like, the advantage the Chiefs have wasn't just having more talented wide receivers, the effect of that talent, the specific type of that talent. and ordered your depth chart in a way that the Chiefs were never able to order their depth chart until December of last year at wide receiver, so that Patrick Mahomes could develop this kind of consistency. And like Marquise Brown was entering week one of the regular season with something he's never had in his career, which was just positive momentum. And this subtracts all of that. And now whenever he does return, whether it's week 2, week 3, week 4, it's going to be all about trying to get up to speed, to catch up to where his teammates have been. And unfortunately, that's just something he's got too much experience doing.
Yeah, and that is the problem. That is the MO with them is the injury history. David Starnes, Allstate Insurance, is proud to bring you the Red, Gold, and Bold, serving the greater Kansas City metro area, covering all the important things in your world, home, business, life, even the fun stuff. That's right, motorcycles, boats, ATVs, you name it. Get with Dave; he'll have you covered. With David Starnes Allstate, it's not just about fender benders. Beyond traditional safeguards, you can enjoy perks like roadside assistance, transportation expense coverage, auto replacement protection to keep you on the road in style. Elevate your coverage, elevate your confidence, and drive worry-free. You can give Dave and his crew a call. Visit them online or stop into any of their locations, including North Kansas City, Liberty, and Branson, Missouri. Don't put those insurance needs off any longer. Get with Dave. He'll give you peace of mind today for the things in your life most important to you. It is David Starnes, Allstate Insurance. Let's talk a little bit about Xavier Worthy. How fast do you think he can get up to speed, right? Does Xavier Worthy, is he a guy they spent a lot of time after they drafted him talking about how quickly he assimilated at Texas? Well, how quick can a guy who's even a quick study become a top shelf NFL wide receiver, Jeff?
Well, he's even in a worse place than Hollywood, just because he wasn't around as much. He wasn't on the field as much early in the offseason, right? And so he's relying on these mental reps, but it's still a huge jump playing in the NFL. And I don't want to sit here and talk trash on the Chiefs coaches, but they have a habit of being very hyperbolic when it comes to selling receivers. They sold Josh Gordon in a big way. They sold MBS in a big way. They thought highly of Cole Hardman, what he could do. And so I think there's a little bit, even though I like the potential of Xavier Worthy, you have to be realistic that he just hasn't played in the NFL yet. And when you're playing in the NFL and you're going against NFL defensive backs, it's different than some guy from, I don't know, Nebraska or Oklahoma State or Kansas State. Like, he's facing better talent. He's facing guys who can run. Yeah, he's fast. But guess what? There's other guys in the NFL who are fast too. And he's small. And so, again, I love that, what he can become. But for him to walk out there, if he walks out there in week 1 and Rashee Rice is in there and Xavier Worthy's not there and they're asking him to be the go-to guy, I'm not crazy about that situation at all.
Yeah. Sam, what do you think? Xavier Worthy, can he step up and be doesn't have to be the number one target. Travis Kelce presumably will be that guy, but can he step up and be the number one wide receiver if they need him to?
No, I mean, Rashee Rice has been clearly the best wide receiver in training camp.
I'm talking about in a doomsday scenario, like if you
without Rashee too.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, look, Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy have both had really good camps, but I got to a point like last week where I'm wondering, were their wide receivers so bad that I keep remembering how bad it looked last year, and therefore everything looks good this year? But their wide receivers do look good this year. They're top ones. And that's what I mean by it. It's come into a natural order. Like, he is a starting caliber wide receiver who you would like to help you out when you need them and not be the got to have 80 yards every game, the way that they were relying on Rashee Rice at the end of last game. But, there's another thing with this Hollywood Brown injury that I'd be concerned about with the Chiefs, which is their offense could potentially become more predictable without Hollywood Brown. That's what his addition was supposed to give you, was less predictability, in the sense that it was, as much as MVS got hate last year, totally understand the criticism he took. Teams knew his route before the play started was going to be a deep pattern. This year, when you had both of those guys on the field with Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy, you had to guess. And also, those guys are going to be running in motion. They like to use Travis Kelce in motion. I think there's one thing that Xavier Worthy has got to improve on. It's his work against press coverage. If you know he's the guy running in motion because you want him not to have to face that press coverage because you don't have the other guys on the field that are going to be running in motion. Like I said, that's, I think, the biggest concern for what it means for the Chiefs offense is just, I mean, they're how they do with as far as keeping teams on their toes. And that's where Xavier Worthy is going to have to get better. So he's his acceleration process, his maturation process, as far as beating press coverage, as far as learning more routes and having a more diverse route tree, that's going to have to take an accelerated process now.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we find out, like, is he the quick study that they say he is, right? Like that was one of the big things. Like I mentioned, Brett Veach hyped up that, hey, he assimilated really quickly. Speed helps. So Jeff, I mean, like if you want to, I know you don't want a guy that's just running go routes, right? But like that is something that can be productive. One, because he can get behind people. Two, he can actually catch. We've seen that already in camp. He can catch on the run. He can track a ball. I mean, just having that threat that they didn't have, even if he doesn't become the number 2 receiver, even if somebody else is stepping up, just being able to be that threat. That's what they wanted MVS to be. He wasn't it. Like that in and of itself will help open up the things underneath, whether it's Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce or just Travis Kelce or screen games, what have you. The fact that he can run, but also run and catch is big.
It is. But he's going to have to Sam's point, he's going to have to learn how to read coverages. He's going to have to be better at that part of it, which is a big challenge. Again, you're not seen as complicated. A lot of coaches will tell you, and scouts will tell you, like that's the two biggest issues receivers got to deal with when they come in the NFL is press coverage, have a guy get up in your face who's athletic, who can take you, who can kill your timing, reroute you, and then being able to understand coverage. Because in college football, you're probably seeing maybe 6 or 7 coverages. In the NFL, you're seeing, 2 or 3 times that amount. And the way Andy Reid's offense works, you're relying on people to read coverages and adjust to the leverage and adjust to the way defenses are playing you. And so I do agree with what Sam is saying, that just because you're fast, it really means like you're almost going to have to learn how to use that speed to create opportunities for you as a route runner. And I don't know if he's that sophisticated just yet.
Yeah. By the way, they said you just looked like EE for a second. That's the freezing up part. You froze up there for just a second. Yeah, a little Eric Eager-esque. Shout out to Double E if he is listening tonight, probably breaking down something and not, but if he is, hello to our buddy Eric Eager. Always nice to see him mentioned. From Eric, good friend of all of ours here on the Red Gold and Bold podcast, just like our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Get your seal coating done now before the weather turns cold. With that cooler weather that's coming, there's a certain temperature where you can't get that done. If your parking lot needs help, of course, one contractor, all things parking lot. We're talking about Gann Asphalt and Concrete. You can find them online at GannAsphalt.com with free consultations, no commissions, and in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warranty. Gann Asphalt keeps your parking lot safer and helps you and your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. Don't wait. Call right now. Get on the schedule for any work you need done with your parking lot. They've been solving parking lot problems for 30 years. Call 816-484-3338. It's Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Online at GannAsphalt.com. What about help, Sam? We can talk CeeDee Lamb. Not a snowball's chance in hell. Juju Smith-Schuster's name is a popular one. Do you think that the Chiefs actually have their head on a swivel looking at wide receivers that they could bring in, or is what they're going to work with already in camp and they're not going to add to it?
I think they're really set at having like 5 wide receiver 5s. So I don't think they need another 5th wide receiver on their team. I mean, look, the Chiefs will need help, I think, at certain positions out of camp. I just don't think wide receiver's it. I mean, we've been discussing like who they're going to have to cut because we think there's guys that are worthy of being on NFL rosters, but don't necessarily have the talent to be a wide receiver 1, 2, or 3. So I think Hollywood Brown is probably going to miss the first week, probably going to miss the second week, I think. Tyreek Hill had this injury. He missed 35 days. The Chiefs are they're 25 days out from his injury as far as week 1. And so that puts them, at about 35 until week 2. I think likely he misses the first 2 weeks. You saw Tyreek Hill, remember, he was questionable to even come back the game that he did come back. And the Chiefs were talking about how great it was that he beat the timeline. And so I think they're going to be without Hollywood Brown for at least a couple of weeks. But I just think the Chiefs are a team that should be operating to put their best roster forward in December and January. And like missing Hollywood Brown for a couple of weeks of the season doesn't alter that.
You see anybody that's worth the Chiefs looking at? I think we all agree. CeeDee Lamb, there's no chance, right? Like that.
You made that decision with Tyreek Hill. When you traded
Yeah.
Tyreek Hill, you made the CeeDee Lamb decision then.
And I'll even say real quick before Jeff, I know I asked you a question. Now I'm going to talk over you, but somebody mentioned the idea of trading up for Xavier Worthy. Listen, one of the reasons you trade up for Xavier Worthy if you're the Chiefs is because you want to get it. One, you want to get the player, and I recognize they already had a first-round pick, and they could have taken anybody in the first round. But the point is, if Xavier Worthy was the last wide receiver that they loved, and they go, okay, we're going to trade back, and you go into the second, you don't have that fifth year. And I know that's become less of a thing because fewer and fewer guys. I mean, the amount of guys that actually get the fifth-year option picked up is very small because the number is so big. But for the Chiefs, that's a bigger deal because they're not going to slap. I mean, does anybody think we're going to see? Like everyone's like, well, they're paying Kelsey. Yeah, and tight ends go for less than half of what wideouts do. That's why this works. I don't think you're ever going to see a $35 million receiver for the Chiefs. So they'll grab somebody who's 2 or 3 years into one of those deals, and they've already paid the big money, and so the numbers come down, right? And so you're really only paying a guy $17 million a year because that's his base salary. You could see that, but we're not going to see the Chiefs give that big deal. So part of the reason why you go get a guy, someone you really like in the first round, is to have that fifth-year option because they might pick that up if a guy's great for like $20 million, 23, 24, wherever it is, as opposed to having to shell out $95 million guaranteed on a big-ticket item.
Yeah, that's legit. And look, I'll answer the question you asked me before I get into that part of it. It's always been a little bit dangerous to go this route with the tiny receivers. And somebody put that up in the comment section earlier, like why they keep drafting these really small guys, because they're fast, they bring them in because they're fast. They want the speed. They want to throw the deep ball. But in reality, like who's been allowed to throw the deep ball over the last couple of years in the NFL? Like every team's had to face that reality. If they're not going to let you do it, if it's a strength of yours. And so that's my concern is that just as last year when they didn't want to accept that this group of receivers they had weren't as good as they thought they were, they've been pushing down this road of, well, we can throw the football down the field again because we got fast guys and we think they can catch. But now one's out, and now what does your offense begin to look like? Who's going to be that reliable receiver? You joke about McCole Hardman, but yeah, McCole Hardman's on the team now. Is it going to be Sky Moore? Is it going to be Justin Watson? It can't just be Travis. And it can't just be a rookie receiver. There's going to have to be guys in here who step up. And now all of a sudden, when I always talk about, hey, look how great these receivers are, you lose one guy, and we're sitting here looking at, well, it's kind of strange right now. It's kind of not that promising.
Yeah, I mean, I would add on to that just real quick. Is first of all, it's that you're right. Why they draft small receivers is because they're fast. And they prioritize speed. If they were big and fast, they'd be going in the top 5 like Marvin Harrison Jr. is.
Yeah.
The other point, though, and Stren, if you want to put Terry's comment on the screen, because it's something I've actually considered now. Like, if you're the Chiefs, do you consider going to Hollywood Brown and trying to add on a year because he's had a really good camp, and now you're getting the risk of this situation, but it also potentially could add the timing of a cheaper option. It's the reason you have them cheap. And I just think it's at least it's a creative thing for a team that needs to be creative in how it acquires its offensive weapons.
Yeah. And I know Josh is a big receiver who breaks a tackle on a slant, gains yardage, just like a deep pass. That's true. And they have that guy. That's Rashee Rice.
That is Rashee Rice.
I mean, that's the guy you're talking about. And I think people forget pretty quickly. And I know the suspension looms and all that, but he was a different kind of guy. He was more your old school West Coast offense type of guy, but they need that next level. And we did, Rashee Rice had one of the best rookie seasons in Andy Reid coaching history. And yet they still were sitting at 8-5 after the Raiders debacle, and just a game up on the playoff spot. They had to really change what they do. I think they want to add that part of their game where they can really go down the field. And I don't see anybody out there that's cost effective. And I think this is what you're going to see. I do think they're going to be drafting a lot of wide receivers because there is a high bust factor in wide receivers. The Chiefs have seen it, but so is every other team. I invite you to go look at every wide receiver. You can look up a team's draft picks and you can sort it by position, and you take a look and you will see everybody's got somebody they took at 20 something, 16, 18, 32, and they suck. They suck. So, it is, as volatile as any position save quarterback when it comes to how much they can blow up.
Let's have our resident Lions fan weigh in on wide receiver drafting. Yeah.
That's right. I can speak volumes for that. But I think they draft receivers based on Andy's creativity, not based on here's a skill set. Here's what this guy can be in the league. And I
100%.
think that's where you get that's where you can get sideways, because when you're sitting there with McCole Hardman without Hollywood Brown, it looks a lot different, right? Because you need him to do more for you, as opposed to granted, this guy hasn't played a down yet, Caleb Williams, but you look at their receiver room, and it's Keenan Allen, and it's Rome Odunze, and it's DJ Moore, 3 different types of guys who can bring 3 different things to the equation. That's the danger in how they operate with Andy's creativity.
I will say that is, they did depart from that last year. That is, Rashee Rice is a departure from what they typically get.
But they were forced to, though.
But they traded up for him. Like, they targeted Rashee Rice. He's not a 4.2, 4.3 guy in the draft. He was a catch and make yards happen after you get in space.
For sure.
But part of their acquisition of Hollywood Brown is to make Rashee Rice better. That's part of the reason they drafted Xavier Worthy, is to make Rashee Rice better. And there was a noticeable difference in the space Rashee Rice was operating with this training camp. And so that's part of the trickle-down effect here too.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think, listen, and that is something that, that we don't know if Rashee Rice is going to be suspended. And that is a huge weapon to have. We didn't see much of that. Like, right now, everybody's a little bit tainted on what the Chiefs have, because we didn't see a lot of Rashee Rice. We didn't see a lot of the ones. So it looks worse than it really is. Whether it's online, curbside, or delivered right to your house, you can shop daily at Besame Wellness for all your cannabis needs. Use the promo code podcast 25 and save 25%. That's podcast 25. Save 25% on your order at Besame Wellness.
Besame Wellness, online or curbside. Shop daily at Besame Wellness for all your cannabis needs. Open Monday through Saturday, 9 to 9. Sundays 10 to 6. Locations in North Kansas City, Liberty, Smithville on Berry Road, and in Warrensburg. Even delivery for medical marijuana. Getting your cannabis has never been easier. We at Besame Wellness strive to make your life as easy as possible and cannabis as accessible as possible.
Let's talk a little bit about the way the backups did get worked over. We talked about this a little bit on the radio show, Sam. The depth of the team, right? Like, that is not going to be a strength this year, right? Like, and we saw that. That was made pretty clear that they're 2s and 3s. If they get to a lot of them, this team's in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, it was the strength of last year's team. It was the under talked about strength of last year's team was, and you mentioned, we talked about on the radio show, and the way I explained it there was like the Chiefs had a Moneyball approach to the offseason a year ago, when 2 guys who were just undervalued by the market were left standing after the first and second wave of free agency, and Drew Tranquill and Mike Edwards. They just said, this guy should be paid. If no one will pay him, we'll scoop him up. And those guys were both starters in the Super Bowl. They were starters throughout the season. They both made key plays throughout the season. This year, those guys didn't fall into their lap in the same way. And I shouldn't say fall into their lap, because they deserve credit for seeing the inefficiency in the market last year and signing those guys. But this year they didn't have that. And so the depth is noticeable, and it's noticeable at training camp. And so I thought going into the preseason game, they're going to struggle in the preseason this year, because they play backups, I think, at a higher rate than most teams do, even if the quarterback does play a series. And I mean, look at the second series of the game. It's a really good defensive line for Jacksonville playing against the backup number 1s for the offensive line. Like, I actually said to Blair Kirkhoff and Jesse Newell before the game, who went with me to Jacksonville, Carson Wentz cannot be looking forward to this game tonight. And it's because they don't have, look, the other part of this is they've drafted well late in drafts. Part of the effect of drafting well late in drafts is guys like Andrew Wiley and Nick Allegretti get multi-year deals. You can't afford them anymore. You can't afford to pay Nick Allegretti a starter salary to be a top backup for you. And so by developing the player, part of the negative effect is you lose them. And then you've got to redevelop that backup player through the draft, through a late round pick, because you're using your top capital to replace your starters. And so it's tough to turn over the depth just as much as it is the starters every year. And they're going to get in these situations where they're going to be a little bit stuck from time to time in a season. And it just, I think this season is one where they can really ill afford to lose guys.
Jeff, last year was one of those years where really go back 2 years ago, and Sam, you even kind of touched on this. That was kind of their re-racking of the team. They had all these young corners, and I don't think they said, 5 rookie defensive backs. That's our key to winning a championship. They did it. It's one of the reasons why I think teams might really regret not getting the Chiefs the last 2 years, because they were so young on defense. I think they were the 6th youngest team in the NFL last year and really young on the defensive side of the ball. And yet Steve Spagnuolo and his coaching staff were able to pull it together. That's certainly a great accomplishment for them. But now we're starting to see those guys have to bump up. And we're really going to, mention, we've talked about it. The PFF grades are fantastic for Josh Williams, covering the 3rd or 4th wide receiver, right? They're great for Trent McDuffie, covering the 2nd wide receiver. Now everybody's got to bump up. And so do we see that we're starting to see some, maybe not, they are very deep at defensive back, but around the team, we're seeing that 2-3 injuries, it could start getting a lot rougher for this team, rougher than it's been the last couple of years.
Yeah, and that's really always been the case of the last couple of years. And we had did one pod on just the position rankings and where is PFF and ESPN and all these different groups ranking these guys. And yeah, I think we were kind of pondering why some groups were lower than others. And this is why. I think overall, like looking at the Chiefs roster, there is a huge drop off from the star elite level talent, which is normal for teams that have had the kind of success that they've had. It's always been about Mahomes and Travis Kelce and Chris Jones and maybe a couple other guys thrown in. Those guys, end of the day, when you look at this team's run the last couple of years, discounting what they did the first Super Bowl, those guys played at a really high level. If those guys don't play at a high, if one of them doesn't play at a high level, they probably don't have these championships. And so that's really always been the case. And it's hard to really, I hear what you're saying about getting the Chiefs, early, but a lot of these young guys are going to be gone and they're going to want to get paid. And it's just, that's the way the NFL works. And, I'm trying to think, like Green Bay would probably be a really good comparison to a team that's in a situation where you got all these young guys who are coming up and doing really well and have all this potential, but sooner or later those guys leave too. And so I think the point I'm going to make here is just that, the backups suck, but I think they haven't been that good for a while. And they've been able to overcome that, but it's also a preseason game too. And you can't put too much stock in that either.
Yeah. To your point too, Jeff, they're going to have a massive free agent class all in 1 year.
Yeah.
Also. Like that's one of the things that they're going to have to figure out. And a reason why they might keep Trent McDuffie. One, he's really young, which they like to do, draft the young guys. But they might have to keep somebody to be a holdover. Otherwise, they could graduate out all 5 of those defensive backs at one time. Where do the backups look the worst to you, Sam?
Interior offensive line. I think they don't have a Nick Allegretti replacement. Defensive end. Felix Anudike-Uzomah struggled against Jacksonville on Saturday night. He's their 3rd D end. They don't play their defensive ends all game. Steve Spagnuolo is known for liking to give guys full series off. And where Felix struggles is the run game. We saw him in Vegas last year give up about a 50-yard run to Josh Jacobs where they just ran right at him. And the Jaguars just ran right at Felix Anudike-Uzomah a few times in that game on Saturday, and he didn't hold up. And so last year when Charles Omenihu was suspended, you knew you were getting him back. But by the way, when he came back, you knew what player you were getting because it wasn't a health thing. This year, you don't know exactly when you're getting him back, and you don't know what player you're getting back when he does come back. And so, defensively, they've got less depth than they do all 3 levels than they did a year ago.
Yeah, no doubt. It's something to keep an eye on, and that's why they need to stay healthy. They've been remarkably healthy, but you also have guys that are starting to get Chris Jones in particular, that's starting to get up there in age. They do keep a pretty young roster. I will say this: the Chiefs have been ahead of the game of understanding. Hey, we may give up a little bit in perceived talent, certainly give up a lot in name value, but young guys stay healthy, old guys get hurt. There's a little debate going on with Tommy and some of the guys about L'Jarius Sneed, 28-year-old corner who had knee questions, right? He played all the games last year.
Hardly practiced last year.
And that's not a sign that's not a good sign for times to come, right? Like,
Soren, you make a great point about the young guys, because I think it's the biggest departure between the John Dorsey and Brett Veach era. Is he is focused on paying guys who are younger. It's why we reacted the way we did to Chris Jones, because he's the exception to the rule. He was part of John Dorsey's rule, but it's been the biggest shift that Brett Veach has made, is emphasizing youth on his roster.
Yeah, I'm not sure why Chris says this. Whoa, dark days ahead for the Chiefs. No, just more challenges to overcome. I mean,
yeah. Look, here's the thing.
How spoiled do you got to be? You got Patrick Mahomes. Settle down.
Yeah, but they've also had.
Go ahead, Jeff.
But they've also had good fortune, right? I mean, you get Juju Smith-Schuster in between a couple of banged up years in Steelers, banged up. He's out of New England now because he was banged up there. But the year he's here, he's healthy, right? You get Drew Tranquill, who's on the street because no one thinks he can play, and he comes in and plays well for you. You get Mike Edwards, who nobody wanted, who came in and played. I don't even know where he's at now. Where's he
Buffalo.
gone to?
Buffalo.
Yeah. MVS. Made a couple plays. As much as we bash MVS, he still made plays for you in the playoffs. Two big playoff games.
I heard MVS was the reason Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers won MVP awards.
Yeah. Kadarius Toney gave a punt return for it. Like they found ways to get the most. They've squeezed the most juice out of these oranges than anybody else in recent memory, and it's been amazing to watch. But yeah, it's like when you're doing that, you can't sit back and say, "Well, hey, why are our backups not as good?" Because they were not that good to begin with. You just had all these other things happen that overcame that.
By the way, Sam, when did you first become friends with Mr. Valdez-Scantling, his father?
You didn't hear MVS say that?
I did.
Yeah, MVS. Well, I don't think Jeff did. MVS said that he was part of the reason that Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes won MVP awards. Yeah,
he was on both teams. We can confirm. He was on the team.
Yeah.
I can also go ahead.
I forgot about Sammy Watkins. That experience too. Remember that?
Yeah, exactly.
Played like 15 games in 3 years.
Yeah, and when they signed Sammy Watkins, he was 25 years old too.
Yeah.
Right, like already free agent eligible at age 25. That's one of the things. You look at everyone's like, oh, they start calling my radio show like, oh, this guy who's 31, he's 32. It's a name. He's had a great career, but like, no, that's not the type of guy.
Yeah.
They might sign a guy like that now.
Yeah.
Right. For a little over the veteran minimum or for a few bucks. But their big ticket free agents are always young.
Dude, they got Bashad Breeland before he went on America's Most Wanted list. Yeah. He gave them some solid years.
If you need solid coverage of your insurance, David Starnes Allstate Insurance has got you covered. Elevate your coverage, elevate your confidence, and drive worry-free. Give Dave and his crew a call, visit them online, or stop into any of their locations. North Kansas City, Liberty, Branson, just to name a few. With David Starnes Allstate Insurance, it's not just about fender benders. Beyond traditional safeguards, you can enjoy perks like roadside assistance, transportation expense coverage, auto replacement protection, covering all the important things in the world, in your world, home, business, life, and even the fun stuff, as well as motorcycles, boats, ATVs, you name it. Get with Dave, and he'll have you covered, serving the greater Kansas City area and all throughout the Midwest. It's David Starnes Allstate Insurance. How big of a problem are the special teams, Jeff? It was really bad.
I can't believe you waited this long to get into that.
Well, I did want it was such a topic on Monday.
Yeah.
I thought, well, we'll finish it. We'll finish strong.
Yeah. It was again, it was only a preseason game, but I can't imagine a worse performance coming out of the gate by a team as lauded and as accomplished as this team is, and that has a special teams coach as good as Dave Tobe. I mean, it was like bad all the way around. And the first thing I'll say is, and I know people have talked about their understanding of the rules and all this stuff. I thought a lot of teams were going to have these kinds of issues with trying to understand how to field the ball, the schemes. The first thing I think is Harrison Butker can't be kicking the ball off because he's out there just kind of wandering around. Like if you're going to have guys trying to tackle people, you probably need to have 11 guys who can do it. So I think that's the first thing I thought. Second thing is figure out who can return and understand what they're doing. I imagine my pick to make the roster, Louis Rees-Zammit, is probably out of the game now. From what I'm hearing, he's not even back there in practice doing it anymore. But yeah, I mean, it was abominable. It was hard to watch at times.
How about it? Sam, and he wasn't. They did slim down the number of guys that were back returning kicks this week. There was a lot of fire in here in the chat room for Dave Tobe. Chris says, Dave Tobe educate anyone? Listen, special teams has struggled each of the last 2 regular seasons and then done pretty good in the postseason to kind of save the day. But this is not good. Like, this to me was Dave Tobe's time to shine, right? You're the special teams guru. We've got new rules. You should get ahead of it first, and instead you're behind it. Like, it's a really, really bad look for Dave Tobe.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the Harrison Butker thing, I mean, the most important aspect of this new kickoff is the kick itself, not whether or not you can have an 11th guy who tackles. Like, Harrison Butker just has to be better at kicking off, or he has to have better strategy. And it was unclear based on his kicks whether or not it was a strategy problem or an aiming problem with his kicks. But you want a low line drive kick that's closer to the sideline to where at least the return man's got to scramble a little bit for whether or not he's going to catch the ball, or he's got to make a decision. Is this going to go out of bounds? Like, ideally, the kick hits the ground. There was none of that. The tackling on the one, I just think that's correctable. The guys don't really tackle in practice. But the big picture of this is related to what we just talked about, which is the depth. The Chiefs are playing a lot of first-year players. I mean, Carson Steele is trying to make his way onto the roster by also playing special teams. He hasn't played it since sophomore year of college at Ball State. He's been to a different school without playing special teams, and now he's trying to do it in the NFL. That's going to be an adjustment period, and this is what the Chiefs do. They have these undrafted guys that they force onto their special teams unit and try and make them players because they want them to really focus on these aspects of the game. And there's a learning curve when you go through that. And I don't think it's a coincidence that these teams have gotten better once the postseason arrive, and these guys that have never played in the NFL suddenly become, experienced players, have 17 games under their belt, but they're going to have to be better from the get-go because there's a lot more strategy to this kickoff thing than there ever has been before.
Unless Ben's right that by week 3 everybody will be kicking touchbacks. I mean,
a lot of teams will be kicking touchbacks.
I can see that scenario. And Temecula says, I like watching and listening to Tobe when he does face the media. Homeboy seems a little sensitive, and I don't know if sensitive is it. He likes to figure out your question and cut you off and start answering it before you get to finish it, which is, I don't know. You want to armchair psychologist, like, means you don't like the questions that are coming at you. Right. And he ain't going to like the questions this next go round either, because it was pretty rough. Listen, we talked about it, Sam, a little bit. Like, I'm not even sure that anyone really knows what should have been called at this point. And that starts at the league office, because I think there are a couple of things that have not been answered to me. One, did McCole Hardman touch it while standing at the 1-yard line on his way back into the end zone? We know the ball hit in the end zone and bounced back into the field of play. And McCole Hardman reached down and looked to be almost like batting it towards the end zone. Did he make contact or not? I'm not sure. Okay. I'd like to know. But did they call him for making contact? Because that's clearly a safety. Then when he takes the knee and he reaches out for the ball, something you used to be able to do, he puts his hand down in the field of play and then brings the ball back. Right. And so and you had a debate with someone about, did he possess the ball?
He grabs, sorry to interrupt, Stren, but it's so related. He grabs the ball while he's kneeling. Like, go back and look at, like, I freeze framed it on my computer. He's got his knee down. He's holding the football in the air. It's outside the end zone. I'm still confused why that ball's not at the half-yard line.
And that's a great point. If he's knees down and the ball is out there, he possesses it.
He's giving himself up with the ball at the half-yard line.
He's up, he's down right there. The other point that I'm making, though, is, okay, can you give yourself up until you fully hold the ball? Like, that to me is where I do think that, I know you had conversations with people off the record, and you were kind of hinting at it. I don't know what all was said, but you hinted at it a little bit today. I think the league really needs to come back and needs to take this play and say, here are all the things. If this happens, this is the call. If this happens, this is the call. Because I think there are numerous ways to look at it. When is possession of the ball? Does he have to bring it into the body? Are you giving yourself up? If you're down, if he stood up and ran, would they say, no, you've given yourself up? That's the intent. If you want to go back to the Bills, what playoff game was it where the guy didn't field the ball and they say, well, his intent was to give it up? I can't remember. Maybe.
The debate is over what point about that play, though, because that's what I'm trying to.
The debate is all over the place. It's like 5 debates.
Was it a safety or was he? Should it? That's the main point,
I think
right?
it could have been down. It
could
have been down at the half-yard line, though. Like it could have been a touchback. I think like I've come to the point where I've understood why it's not a touchback, although it's not explicit in the rules at all. Like the ruling on that play. For those wondering, let's see. I had this rule. So it says on the kickoff rule, when you go to the website, it says kick hits in the end zone and stays in bounds. So it checks that box.
Yeah.
But then it says dash returned or downed dash if downed, then touch back to the 30-yard line. But there's one thing missing from that. It doesn't say that the ball has to be downed in the end zone, that the ball cannot leave the end zone and then come back. It just says if downed. Well, there's no question McCole Hardman downed the ball, in which case the rule book needs to be more explicit in saying it has to be downed in the end zone. And look, the NFL screwed up from the start by calling it a landing zone. They've called the 0 to the 30 or the 20-yard line the landing zone. This end zone appears to be part of the landing zone. And the fact that you get lucky if the ball hits in the landing zone and bounces back out, I think there's an entire another discussion about whether that's even the proper rule, because it's a change. It's an intentional change from a year ago to where we saw guys, as soon as they realized the ball was going over their head, they just jogged to the sideline because the play is over. We at least know that part is no longer the case, but the rule book is definitely not explicit on what happens after.
Yeah,
what
but if
happens
that play
after the guy picks up the football?
Yeah. So if that play happened last year, if the guy's in the end zone and reaches out and grabs the ball, but you're saying if the ball's outside the end zone, he's in the end zone, reaches in and grabs it, you think that should be a touchback?
Well, because the ball hit the end zone first, it landed in the end zone, then bounced out.
Yeah.
But let me point something else out from that. He puts his hand that he doesn't grab the ball with down outside the end zone.
Yeah.
So does a hand on the ground? I know a hand, you're still up if the hand's the only thing on the ground, but does the hand outside the end zone?
His knee's on the ground too.
Well, that's what I'm saying. But his opposite hand is outside the end zone while he's grabbing the ball. Does that now make the knee not the furthest point back? So he's up there. And to your point, is he now downed at the one because he's giving himself up? Or does that make a possession at the one that he now brings back into the end zone? And then when he's touched, that makes it a safety. And I will go back to the point. I'm pretty sure he touched the ball when he was running back to it because it looks like it changes direction, which means he's touched it and changed the direction of the ball in the field of play.
And the ball's live then at that point.
Yes, the ball's live. I just imagine that when the NFL...
The ball's live anyway, but it has to do about not a punt.
No.
It has to do with the field. Like, and I went through the rule book after Sam and I talked today, and it sucks. They're not ready for it.
Well, nobody thought about that play.
I did imagine that when the NFL's coming up with this rule, that somebody in the room had to be like, you know what? McCole Hardman's going to make us think of something we're not thinking of right now.
Yeah. See, I feel like if the ball's the 1 yard line, and he's in the end zone, and he goes and touches it, that doesn't make him have possession of it because
he just
can't touch it. Okay, now it's my ball. You got to possess the ball.
Right. He picks it up. He doesn't just touch it. He picks it up.
And Sam's point is he picks it up in the air with his one hand. So that should be possession. He's
got the ball
to bring it back to his body.
And his knee's on the ground.
But that's my point is, does the NFL consider that possession? Like they'd consider it a catch, but is it possession when you're downing it, or does that not happen until you have the ball? Like they need to take this play, and really it should already be out. They should have had their entire rules committee, not the coaching staff, on this and saying, okay, let's define this. We've got 3 weeks to figure this crap out. We need to define it because they've got all kinds of things that they could be chewing on this.
There's a couple things. One, if it hits in the end zone, the rule should just be a touchback. It's not in the landing zone. It should be a touchback. Unless the guy catches it and wants to return it, he's got the option. Number two, if this is an example for why the NFL's route usually to the implementation of new rules is they try it a preseason before. It's not the preseason of the year that it goes into effect. Usually they are 13 months in advance. And they're rushing this rule into play. And we're going to see the effects of this. If this play had not happened in the preseason, which was a very good chance it didn't, it would happen in the regular season. And look, the rest were lost on this
playoff game.
Well, and here's I'll give you two things. By the way, first I'll tell you we're brought to you by our friends at GAN Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the greater Kansas City area. Nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Don't risk accidents and liability in your parking lot. Get your parking lot restriped today. A brightly striped lot will cut down on accidents and keep your parking lot as safe as possible. GAN Asphalt and Concrete. Call them at 816-484-3338. Find them online at GANasphalt.com. To your point, Sam, about like it hits the end zone, it should just be down. What if it lands in the landing zone and rolls into the end zone? They want you bringing that out. They want the live ball scramble. They want the kind of the potential for there to be kind of an onside kick on every kick. Like we got a live ball here in the end zone. Somebody's got to get on that thing. So I think they want it live.
Yes, I only mean if it lands. I only mean if it lands in the end zone. If it rolls into the end zone, those rules are better defined in the rule book. By the way, if it rolls into the end zone, what you have to do with it. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was interrupting.
Well, it's just back to the original point. Like the rules did not account for this play, and people can look at the rule book and say, well, this then this, but it doesn't have this exact play. It's just nowhere to be found.
You're interpreting it if you come to a conclusion. It's not defined.
You're adding your own language to it, which they did not add yet.
Which in Kansas City seems to always favor the way the ruling would go for the Chiefs. I'm not sure why that is, but it's a remarkable, perfect score on that one. The thing that I think, number one, to your point about like just practicing it, it's such a drastic change. I don't think you could practice, do this for 3 preseason games and then say, now we're going back to our old rule, right? I think they probably thought about that and went, we're changing like 40 rules on this thing. We got to be all in and we're going to have bumps. Let's figure it out along the way. What I'm disappointed, and maybe I'll give them to Wednesday. If Wednesday they don't make an announcement like, we've looked at it, we've rewritten the rules, we've sent it out to the teams. Hey, it's a big change. We're trying to bring action to the kickoff. Bear with us here. It's a work in progress. That's what they should do because everybody gets it, right? Yeah. But instead they're trying to kind of hide and act like, no, it's all defined there. Like, trust me. And then behind closed doors, they're all sweating bullets because they know it's kind of a mess. But like, here's what I would ask you. Is it exciting? Because that's what this is supposed to bring back. Are we bringing excitement to the game, or did you see enough to go, this could be exciting once we figure it all out? Or is it a titanic waste of time, another way to expose their referees, which have been just bombed constantly, and they should just get out of the kickoff business and quit screwing around with it? Are you leaning pro new rule or old rule / get rid of kickoffs, Jeff?
I liked it. I thought it was different. Okay. Now, it sucked if you were a Chiefs fan watching the Jaguars returning kicks, having big kick returns, and obviously the big controversy with Hardman. But I thought it made the play more interesting by far. Yeah, I mean, it's like I prefer a world where kickoffs are part of the equation. I think it's fun. I think it creates a different type of strategy. I get the concussion part of it, but I grew up watching great returners. That to me is when you see a great returner doing great stuff, like a Devin Hester or a Billy White Shoes Johnson or Eric Metcalf, one of these guys back in the day, Dion back when he was with Atlanta doing some of that stuff. It's fun. So I liked it.
It's exciting for
yeah, that's right. That's true. Yeah. Yeah, but Dante Hall, he was a fan favorite.
So like,
go ahead.
When I was watching that Jaguars return with Washington, that he returned like 73 yards, my actual thought watching that is this is never going to happen. I mean, he had to beat like 6 guys. It was a Dante-like Hall return against the Broncos, that punt return where at one point the closest 4 guys to him are all wearing Chiefs uniforms. There's like 4 or 5 of them, and he happens to get through them all. He still doesn't take it back for a touchdown. I'm just thinking this is going to be really difficult to return any kick past the 50-yard line. It's the most exciting play that I'm sure the preseason has seen in this kickoff actually made me think the chances of those plays happening are even slimmer than I thought.
Yeah, I do think it's going to be tough, but there is at least the potential. And I think there's the potential for some fumbles and some scrambles around. I don't know if that's what you want, is you want wonky bounces of the football all over the place determining playoff games, right? Like, so I think that's going to be,
It's gimmicky.
Yeah, well, I know that's the football. That's what we like. That's why, when the ball's loose on the ground. Yeah, but you're kind of creating a scenario You have a free-for-all. And by the way, isn't part of the problem is that they didn't want injuries. And if you've got everybody, like in flag football, if the ball goes on the ground, it's dead because they don't want people diving for the ball and getting concussions and getting head injuries. So now we don't like the collisions, but we want the ball rolling around on the ground, everybody diving head first for the ball, right? Like you got to remember what it is you're trying to accomplish here. Sam, I want to ask you, where do you sit? And we've got more time to look at it, but are you leaning towards you like the new rule or go back to the old rule or even just get rid of kickoffs? Where are you?
I think go back to the old rule for two reasons. One, I agree with your point. It's gimmicky, and I don't want gimmicky determining the outcome of football games. But number two, I mean, when we listened to the referees came and visited St. Joe for a day. We're allowed to ask them questions, but first they led off with a video. And in there, Troy Vincent basically says that last year, and I can't remember the exact percentages, there was something like 25 to 28% of kickoffs were returned. And this year they're hoping to clear 30. And I thought, you're implementing all this and you're trying to improve it like 5 to 10%? Like
2 to 5.
Like, yes, like I anticipated they were going to say, we're going to have twice as many returns kicked because there was not a kickoff return in the Super Bowl. And I understand that they think that's a really exciting play. It's been a really exciting play in the Super Bowl itself. There's been a Super Bowl MVP because of a kickoff return. I understand having kickoff returns part of the game, but I don't have a better solution for it, I guess, is my hesitancy to criticize it outright, but it does feel very gimmicky. And there could be a game decided because somebody's able to skip. I mean, what happens when it's wet? What happens when it's in the snow and then you're skipping it off of some guy's shin or something like that? Like, this is going to get more gimmicky than we've seen yet. It hasn't even gotten cold outside.
Yeah, and that's one of the things people are talking about the XFL. The XFL didn't play in the cold.
Right.
We don't know what it looks like in snow when you're doing this thing. And then also there is this debate, and I know I've heard it quoted a lot of times that there were 0 touchdown returns in the XFL, but Dave Tope said there were 2, right?
He told me there were 0.
He said 0. Somebody publicly said there were 2.
XFL.
I thought it was somebody from in the Chiefs organization that said there were 2.
Let me look it up. But
yeah.
2023, San Antonio's Fred Brown returned 196 yards for a touchdown.
Because I've heard both. I've heard 2 and I've heard 0.
And XFL had 1. They had 1. So let's just take the middle.
Yeah, we'll take the middle. We'll say 1.
It's 1, but CBS has a story from July. XFL. What's funny is the average return in the NFL was 23. It says XFL is 21.3. NFL had 4 kickoff returns last year. XFL had 1 for a touchdown.
I love Temecula. He says, "Have we run out of time to complain about Kadarius Toney?"
Put him and McCall back for the kickoff. Let's really go nuts.
Let's see it. Let's bring it full force. We're proudly brought to you by our friends at David Starnes Allstate Insurance, serving the greater Kansas City area. He covers everything important, home, business, and life, but also fun things as well, like motorcycles, boats, ATVs. Check it out. You can contact Dave. Give him a call, visit him online, or stop into any of their locations. North KC, Liberty, Branson, just to name a few. Don't put those insurance needs off any longer. Get with Dave right now. David Starnes, Allstate Insurance, of course, always brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com and by our friends at Besame Wellness. Remember, you can save 25% on your entire order. Curbside, online, delivery, podcast 25. Use the promo code podcast 25 and save 25% on your entire order at Besame Wellness. So for Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, NFL.com, Sam McDowell from the Kansas City Star, I'm Soren Petro saying thank you very much for joining us here on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast.